Thank you for downloading this podcast from the British Theatre Guide. For more information about British Theatre Guide, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.
Helen Goalen and Abbi Greenland are the founder members of RashDash. Since 2009, they've been making musical, thought-provoking, physical performance work together. And they've both taken time out from rehearsing The Darkest Corners, a new commission for Transform Festival, to talk to us about that production as well as RashDash's history and possibly future projects. So, Helen and Abbi, thanks so much for coming and talking to us.
Pleasure.
Firstly, for those unfamiliar with the work of RashDash, could you tell us a bit about the company?
We are a feminist company. We make very political work. We make work that's always about something that we really care about, so it's often very personal as well as political. We often work with live musicians, so music is a really important part of the show. The shows are always very physical and they normally tell some kind of a story, but not always in a linear way. And
what have your recent kind of projects been? I know I've seen a couple of them. I think your latest work, two-man show. How does that fit into kind of that political performance work that you make?
Two-Man Show was about us wanting to start to make work for and about men as well as for and about women, and it feels like as feminists that's a really important thing to do, to make feminism, our feminism, very inclusive and address the problems that patriarchy causes for men as well as for women, because we very much feel like if we're going to bring this down one brick at a time, we're going to need to do it all together. So we wanted to think and talk about men and masculinity as well as women and femininity. So that's where that project came from. And
the project before that, possibly the one just before that, We Want You to Watch?
Yes.
That, to me, also had a really strong element of wanting to kind of deconstruct something. I mean, it might have been the internet, it might have been pornography, those kind of male-female relations. So there's something about your work which is about saying, hang on, things don't need to be like this, we can take something down and start again.
I think so, yeah. Like often we start with something that's really huge actually, and then kind of pull that apart and deconstruct that and go, yes, it's a huge thing, but is there anything smaller that we could do that actually might be quite simple in order to reframe how we think and how we act and how we are with each other? So yeah, that definitely feels like something that runs through our work, taking on something that is way too challenging.
Yeah.
And We Want You to Watch was about taking down pornography, taking down capitalism, taking down the internet, but it also became about taking down or taking apart theatre, because conventionally and formally we were interested in breaking that kind of conventional mode of storytelling, because it feels like, how can you separate them from the context within which they've been made, which is capitalism and patriarchy? So it's always taking down massive macro structures, but then looking at how that affects the form and the way that we make theatre within those contexts as well.
Can you tell us something about how you make theatre? Because I mean, you're a devising company. There's a strong physical element, a strong musical element to a lot of, if not all, of your work. How do your pieces come back? Is there a kind of RashDash method of working, or is it different for every show?
We're getting closer and closer to a RashDash process, but every process is so different because the subject that we're tackling really decides what that process is going to be. Two-Man Show was a very playful process, so really we did a lot of reading and a lot of researching, and then it was Helen, Becky and I, and Becky's the musician that we work with a lot, in a room together, stumbling across the form because of having really swam about in the material and the research for such a long time, that all of the playing and devising that we were going to do was going to be informed by that. So that was a very playful process that was about allowing us to have as much time as possible to discover something unconventional rather than trying to force it to be unconventional. Whereas with We Want You to Watch, we had a very clear idea. It was much more conceptual in that we knew what that pattern was, what the shape of that show was going to be, and then it was about making within that shape. So it really changes from show to show.
And it feels like with this show, it's sort of been somewhere in between the two, because we've been developing this over quite a long period of time, and it very much began with lots of conversations, lots of reading, lots of finding stories, and then writing songs from those things, and then developing that into a much more kind of tightly harnessed structure, which is what we've got now, which has a lot of text in it as well. So yeah, we've kind of I think it has been a combination of exploratory and finding something that's actually quite robust.
And although we are a devising company, we do sit down and write. So the writing happens because we know what this scene has to do and what we wanted to say, and then we do sit separately and write instead of improvising text. The physicality happens in a very devised, playful way, and we improvise a lot in order to find that, but the text happens in more of a new writer's process, I think. Yeah.
Has it always been thus? What were your earliest shows like? Because you formed in, was it 2009?
Yeah. I think it has kind of always worked in that way, actually. Even at a much earlier stage, we've always written text rather than improvised text. And there's been a huge amount of kind of piecing stuff together and working out a structure and then throwing that away. We do a lot of kind of going through different drafts of things, and that's always pretty consistent. We might have a splurge at something and go, this is the show, come away from it and go, no, that's really not the show.
So could you tell us a bit more about this latest project, The Darkest Corners? This is part of Transform Festival, and it's opening in, a couple of weeks' time? Do you know the date?
Yes, it's the 20th to the 21st of April.
The 22nd.
Yes.
2021-22, that's right.
Thank you. Great. Important to get
Three shows only.
3 shows only. And it's billed as in a secret location in Holbeck?
The location has actually been revealed. It is a car park in Holbeck off Globe Road, between Globe Road and Water Lane.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. You heard it here first, possibly. I certainly did. So, how has that commission for Transform come about? I know you've been working on that, as you say, a long time. Tell us a bit about the show.
Yeah, it's come out of a process of development. So Amy asked us a couple of years ago if there was something that we would be interested in testing for Transform. And we started talking about this show, and it was going to be a show about the fear of violence and what it is to be a woman walking on the streets on your own at night, and how that feels and how kind of terrifying that can feel, even if you've never had an experience of violence, because we hear so many stories. Sometimes the scariest thing is just being in your head. So we started exploring that, and it felt clear quite early on that we wanted it not just to be about us and about Leeds and about the UK, but to take references from lots of different stories from all around the world. And that music was going to be a really big part of that, and that we wanted to be working with a band, and that we wanted it to be an outdoor show because that felt really right. We've just been working with those ideas for quite a long time, but I think in terms of the commissioning, the more kind of invested and interested Amy got in the show, the more kind of likely that became that it would actually happen this year.
I think there was also an invitation early on from Amy to think about scale in a different way, because we've made quite a few studio-sized shows, and we're a very visual company and very physical company, and we've wanted to work on a bigger scale for a while, and Amy invited us to think like that, not necessarily to make a big scale show, because if the idea doesn't belong on the big scale, then we didn't want to do that, but this idea felt like it belongs outside because it's about being outside, and it really plays with how you can feel very small and how you can feel very big depending on how you're feeling in public spaces, especially after dark. So playing in a car park, and because it's a headphone show, so the sound experience for the audience is a very intimate experience. You can hear what the woman's thinking in your head all of the time, but sometimes she'll be very far away from you and sometimes she'll be very close to you, and that experience feels like it's really articulate in terms of how you can feel as a woman on your own at night.
So that's something new for you as well, is it, working with this headphone technology, working
It
outdoors?
is, yeah. I mean, we've made 2 outdoor shows, but they were both quite small scale, sort of low tech pieces, so this is very, very different for us, but it really felt like it was the right thing to do with this show, because we really wanted to get that intimate experience of what it is to be in someone's head, and it felt like that was the way to do it.
But we are actually working with Max and Ben Ringham, the sound designers that are working on this show. They also worked on We Want You to Watch. Right. So although we haven't worked with headphones before, we've worked with these sound designers, and there's something about continuing those collaborations that makes the step up in scale and the step up in terms of the technological advancement feel really possible because you're playing with the same gang as you've been playing with.
Yeah, and on your website you sort of talk about your collaborators as family and this sort of extended kind of family of RashDash. Do you have other? And there's Becky. Is it Becky Winker?
Becky Wilkie.
Wilkie, sorry,
composer,
Becky Wilkie.
Yeah.
So she's working on this show with you again.
She is. Yes.
Are there any other sort of returning friendly faces that you're working with, or have you?
We're working with Ollie Townsend, who designed Two Man Show and Want You to Watch, and Catherine Williams, who did the lighting design for Two Man Show. So yeah, it does really feel like we're starting to find the people that we have a shared understanding and a shared kind of aesthetic. You
talk as well on your website about wanting to make theatre that's sensual as well as cerebral, and that's something that really struck me about, for instance, Two Man Show, that worked very well for that, very successfully. What are you aiming to sort of have the audience feel kind of sensually in this production? What are those kind of sensations or the kind of visceral elements of this show?
It's particularly tricky with this show because it deals with fear of and sexual violence. It's how to take people to a place that feels like you can understand how that woman might feel without it being a very horrible or triggering experience. So I guess every woman's been catcalled, and most women will have been followed in a car at some point, or from the research we've done and from our own personal experiences, I think that's pretty likely. So there's no way that you're not going to be triggered to imagine that kind of scenario. But it's been quite difficult walking the line between putting people in the head of a woman who is fearing violence on a day-to-day basis in quite a serious way, even though she might not be under any serious danger, and triggering people who have got difficult experiences. So we want to, for people who don't know what it's like and for people who aren't afraid, to help them understand and empathise with how you might feel when you're on your own at night. But we don't want to be needlessly violent. So with this show, that's been a particularly hard line to walk, and we hope that that line is delicately dealt with. And we talk a lot in the show about how we don't want to be needlessly violent. We're present as the makers of the show, commenting on how we're making it, so that at least if you are going to a difficult place with it, you can see that we're all making it there in front of you, and there's no point at which we ask you to forget that this is a show. We don't kind of move away from reality altogether. It's not a film in that way. So yeah, in this show, in terms of the sensual experience, there's a lot of physicality, which is really about delving into what it means to be frightened and what it means to feel vulnerable. But also there's a lot of physical work that's about a woman being really tough and powerful and strong, because it feels like a lot of the stories that you're told, or a lot of the advice that you get as a woman, is about if a man tries to get you, there's pretty much nothing you can do. He will be stronger, he will be faster. And I think that's a kind of vicious circle, because if you believe that, it's more likely to be true. So if we start to tell stories about being tough and escaping and actually being able to take on people, then maybe you don't maybe that can help actually be tougher and stronger. So there's quite a lot of real strong women being really strong in the show to try and balance out you could get attacked and it could be disastrous for you.
And the show also does explore freedom as well, because I think this is another thing that kind of runs through our work, is that we want to be optimistic and hopeful and have a real belief in humanity, I guess. So there's moments of movement that feel really about connection and people meeting each other as humans and people exploring what they want to do in their bodies. So I think that will have a kind of that sensuous feel.
I mean, that sounds to me like a development from some of the themes you're exploring in Two Man Show. That sort of performance of strength, femininity, masculinity, those kind of questions.
Yeah.
But on a bigger canvas?
On a bigger canvas with more bodies, because this company is bigger and there's another woman and two men in it. And so there's an extent to which the men play men that are scary or men that a woman might want to be scared of, but we're making sure that there's space in the show to explore two men coming together and moving together in a very positive, boisterous, tender way, so that there's room for lots of kinds of physicality that are positive, not just we should be scared of each other's bodies, which would be the worst thing to come out of this show. Yeah.
Well, and I remember because I saw an early work in progress, a scratch performance of it at last year's Transform Festival, and there was a song that you performed there, which was about feel the fear. I don't know whether that's the title of the song, and that was all about the conflicting advice that as a woman you get on how to deal with, if you're accosted, if somebody comes up to you, speak calmly but speak loudly. It's kind of these sort of things. And the police will take your complaint seriously. The police won't, care. And so a lot of it was about those kind of tensions and conflicts in all kinds of advice that you might get or ways of behaving. And I wondered if you were working towards resolving those tensions, or whether you were really kind of presenting them and using them as a kind of a generative kind of power in your work.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the conflict of the show comes from. It comes from, but what should you actually do? And I don't know. And, well, what should men actually do? Well, I don't know. I think there's a character in the show who tries to be really nice to a woman that's scared that he's going to attack her, and he alleviates her stress by saying, I'm a nice guy, I'm not going to hurt you. But the more he says that, the more she thinks, but are you a nice guy, and are you just trying to lull me into a false sense of security? So exploring lots of the ways that it's very difficult to get out of a cycle of thinking of women as prey and men as predators, but how can we all get out of that together? So yes, that those contradictory advice and the contradictory instincts that you have are definitely the motor for the drama of the show.
And it feels like we don't offer a solution, and we don't go, no, this is what we need to do in order to be able to solve this problem, but we present lots of situations that are complex and complicated, and hope that really makes people think and engage with it and recognise it as a real thing. Because that's one of the things that we found as we were researching this show, that so many women thought that they were the only person that felt frightened on their own at night and felt that they were blowing out of proportion and that they were being a bit crazy. So in a way, just naming those things in this show and going, no, this is real, this exists, it's tangible, is a big thing in itself, to then get people talking and thinking and hopefully acting differently.
Do you sort of anticipate discussions after the show, carrying on?
I think so, because I think, like the scratch that you came to at the Hub last year, lots of people wanted to talk to us about it straight away and go and talk about their own experiences and the bits that they identified with. And there was a previous scratch that we did the year before as well, where a massive debate started between about 60 people, and it does feel like something that people have got a lot to say about, but that they haven't necessarily voiced those things before, so that feels really exciting.
And that sort of leads me on to a question about, because the Darkest Corners, I believe, is drawing on the sort of Reclaim the Night movement as part of your research that you worked on. It's kind of, 40 years since? I can't do the maths. 40-ish years since the kind of big Leeds Reclaim, was it the 70s? Late 70s?
Yes, it was,
trying to do the maths. So, that sort of movement started very strongly across the north, but particularly in Leeds. And so there's an element of that kind of history to this this topic. So I was just wondering how you can see theatre as playing a role in activism, or vice versa, as kind of if you have a kind of a way that you can use theatre as part of an activist kind of programme.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is probably one of our most overtly activist pieces, and we keep calling it a feminist activist cabaret. And it feels like the role of this show isn't to tell people what to do or what to think, but it's to say it would be really great if you could understand and empathise with what's going on in our heads, because that's the beginning of stuff changing. So it kind of is activist in quite an angry way at certain points, but really it rests with a very joyful invitation to be different and to understand each other more, which is kind of where we got to with Two Man Show as well. It feels like it's not very helpful to tell people what to think or what to do, but it is very helpful to let people in to how you're feeling.
And it feels like having that notion of this being a piece of activism has affected some of the choices that we've made as well, in terms of going, actually, this needs to be really clear. And there's lots of complications within that clarity, but it's not the kind of thing that we want someone to go away from and go, oh, I didn't really get what that was about, you know. It feels like it's a really good opportunity to say very clearly and hopefully creatively, theatrically and all of those things, but, you know, really say what we want to say.
Well, I'm very excited to see it. I mean, I thought, as I say, the two-man show was very successful in that, and that started from a position of real apparent certainty.
Yeah.
You know, you have these characters saying, this is the history, this is how, you know, this is how the world works, and then move through to a sort of increasing uncertainty and saying, well, there are all these contradictions, and that, you know, there are things that we can't resolve, and opening that space for discussion, as you say. Can I just finish by asking you what's next after the Darkest Corners? Do you have plans confirmed as yet, or are you concentrating on this for now?
Well, we're going to tour two-man show again.
Oh, brilliant.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be in Edinburgh again during the last week, during the British Council Showcase, and then we're going to tour it to 9 venues around the UK. And then there are some other projects, but we can't quite say what they are yet. But, I mean, they're going to be even more challenging and scary to make than the last ones that we've made. So
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Helen and Abbi of RashDash.
thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to a podcast from British Theatre Guide. For more information, please visit britishtheatreguide.info.